The Galactic Council chamber had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador stood motionless at the center of the vast circular room, her combat boots planted firmly on the polished crystalline floor. The severed head of Admiral of the Armada lay before her on the ancient negotiation table, its four compound eyes still wide with the shock of its final moments. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species sat frozen in their seats. Some had multiple hearts that had stopped beating entirely. Others released involuntary pheromones of fear that filled the air with the scent of terror. The diplomatic corps had protocols for many situations, but none covered a human warrior casually decapitating an enemy admiral and using it as a conversation starter. His voice cut through the silence like a plasma blade. Now then, shall we discuss new terms for humanity's membership in this council? 3 hours earlier, the situation had been entirely different. The emergency session had been called after the Armada's unprovoked attack on New Geneva, humanity's colony world. 40,000 civilians dead, orbital platforms destroyed, agricultural domes shattered, leaving families to suffocate in the toxic atmosphere. They claimed it was a navigation error and offered to pay for the inconvenience. Had arrived as humanity's representative, but she hadn't come alone. Hidden in the shadows of the council chamber's upper galleries were 12 members of humanity's most elite military unit, the Void Reapers. They moved like ghosts through areas that supposedly had the galaxy's most advanced security systems. Admiral had been smug during the initial proceedings. They were one of the galaxy's oldest spacefaring civilizations, with technology that predated human civilization by. Their crystalline carapaces could deflect most energy weapons, and their forearms allowed them to operate multiple weapon systems simultaneously. They had conquered 17 systems in the past century, always claiming navigation errors or defensive actions. The human colony was established in violation of territorial claims, had announced, his translator converting his clicking speech into standard galactic. Our response was measured and appropriate. We demand the humans evacuate 12 additional systems that encroach upon our sovereign space. The other council members had nodded along. This was how things worked in galactic politics. Older civilizations bullied newer ones. Humans were barely 3 generations into space travel. They were expected to bow, apologize, and retreat. Had listened patiently for exactly 17 minutes. Then she had done something that would reshape galactic diplomacy forever. She had smiled. It wasn't a diplomatic smile or a nervous expression. It was the cold, predatory smile of an apex predator that had just identified its prey. In her previous life, before becoming an ambassador, had been colonel of the Solar Marine Corps. She had earned her diplomatic position by understanding that sometimes the most effective negotiation happened at the point of a weapon. Admiral, she had said, standing slowly from her seat, I appreciate your candor. It helps clarify our position considerably. The Admiral's compound eyes had focused on her with what his species considered amusement. Your position is simple, human. Accept our terms or face the consequences. I see, and what consequences would those be? The Armada consists of 400 vessels. We have been conquering worlds since before your species learned to make fire. You have perhaps 50 ships capable of interstellar combat. The mathematics are simple. Had nodded thoughtfully. Mathematics. Yes, I've always been good with numbers. For instance, did you know that humans have discovered 112 different ways to kill a... We've been studying your species very carefully since first contact. A ripple of unease had passed through the chamber. The diplomatic corps preferred veiled threats and economic pressure. Direct discussion of violence was considered primitive. Empty boasts, had replied. Human warriors are soft. You have no true understanding of combat. Your species has never faced a real predator. That's an interesting theory, had said. Perhaps we should test it. Before anyone could react, she had activated a small device on her wrist. The signal had been simple: execute Operation Decapitation. The Void Reapers had moved with surgical precision. The council chamber's security had been designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, but it couldn't stop humans who had trained in zero-gravity combat since childhood. They dropped from the ventilation systems like silent death, using molecularly sharpened blades and bare hands. The first guard had died before he could draw his weapon. The second had managed to activate an alarm, but the sound had been cut short as Staff Sergeant removed his head with a single stroke. By the time Admiral realized what was happening, Corporal was already behind him. The execution had been swift and professional. Its crystalline carapace, so effective against energy weapons, had provided no protection against a human-forged blade designed specifically to exploit anatomy. Had identified the precise point where the Admiral's neck connected to his thorax and struck with the speed that had made her the Solar Marine Corps hand-to-hand combat champion 3 years running. The head had separated cleanly from the body, had tossed it to like a game ball, then faded back into the shadows with the rest of the Reapers. The entire operation had taken 43 seconds. Now stood in the silence that followed, waiting for the galaxy's most powerful beings to process what they had just witnessed. The first to speak was Chancellor of the Hegemony, his 3-meter frame trembling slightly. The Hegemony controlled 47 star systems and maintained the galaxy's largest trade network. They were not accustomed to feeling vulnerable. This is madness," he stammered through his translator. "You cannot simply murder a council member during negotiations. There are protocols, procedures, civilized methods of dispute resolution." Picked up the severed head by one of its sensory stalks, examining it with the detached interest of a scientist studying a specimen. "Admiral murdered 40,000 civilians 3 days ago. Men, women, children, elderly, infants still learning to walk. He called it a navigation error. I call it what it is, an act of war. But the proper response is to file a grievance with the diplomatic corps," insisted representative of the Democratic World's Union. "We have procedures for investigating such incidents." "Your procedures," said, setting the head down carefully in the center of the table where everyone could see it, "involve 6 months of paperwork, followed by a strongly worded letter, followed by a fine that amounts to pocket change for a civilization that controls 30 star systems." Meanwhile, Admiral would have continued his navigation errors until every human colony was ash and debris. She began walking slowly around the table, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Every representative tracked her movement with the instinctive wariness of prey animals watching a predator. "Let me tell you something about human mathematics, Chancellor. Yes, the Armada has 400 ships, but here's what your intelligence reports don't mention. Humans don't just build weapons, we become them." She paused behind the seat of ambassador of the Pacifist Coalition, a species that had renounced violence for over 3. Its bioluminescent patches were flashing in rapid patterns that indicated extreme distress. "Every human child learns about war from the moment they can understand language," continued. "Not because we worship violence, but because we understand that peace is only possible when those who would break it know the cost. We study every species we encounter. We learn your weaknesses, your strengths, your tactics, your technology. We prepare for the day when diplomacy fails." Representative of the technocracy spoke up, his mechanical voice perfectly modulated. "Your species has been part of the galactic community for barely 75 standard years. We have maintained order herefore. You cannot simply discard our established methods because they inconvenience you." Reached into her jacket and a small data pad. She placed it on the table next to the Admiral's head. "This contains detailed tactical analyses of every major military force in the galaxy. Ship compositions, weapon specifications, patrol routes, command structures, logistical vulnerabilities. We've been preparing this since our first day of Council membership." The silence that greeted this announcement was profound. "You see, the fundamental difference between humans and the rest of you is simple. You assume peace is the natural state of the universe. We know better. Peace is a luxury that must be fought for, defended, and maintained. When someone threatens that peace, they must face consequences that make them reconsider their actions." Chancellor's voice was barely a whisper. "You're threatening the entire council." "No," replied, returning to her position at the center of the room. "I'm offering you a choice. You can continue operating under the old system, where established powers prey upon newcomers with impunity. Or you can accept that humanity brings something new to the galactic community, the willingness to make evil actions expensive." She gestured toward the severed head. Admiral believed that might made right, that superior numbers and older technology gave him the authority to commit genocide whenever convenient. I have just demonstrated that he was mistaken. Representative of the military caste spoke for the first time since the execution. They were widely regarded as the galaxy's premier warriors, with a culture built entirely around martial excellence. "Your soldiers moved well," he admitted grudgingly. But this was a single engagement against an unprepared opponent. Combat is more than ambush tactics. Smile returned. Would you like to test that theory, Representative? I can have a full company of Void Reapers here within 6 hours. We can settle this question in whatever manner you prefer. The representative's combat clause extended involuntarily, then slowly retracted. Even among his warrior culture, discretion was valued over suicidal bravery. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Chancellor. New terms for humanity's participation in this council, replied. Terms that recognize certain realities about our species. First, any unprovoked attack on human civilians will result in immediate and proportional retaliation against the aggressor's leadership, not their military forces, their leadership. We will hold decision-makers personally accountable for the decisions they make. The implications of this statement sent visible waves of fear through the assembled representatives. Second, human colonies and trade routes will be considered off-limits to all navigation errors and defensive actions. Anyone who cannot navigate safely around clearly marked human space should probably invest in better navigation equipment. Third, in cases of disputed territorial claims, humans reserve the right to settle matters through combat trials. Single combat between designated champions, with the victor's species claiming the disputed territory. Representative's voice was high with panic. You cannot simply overturn 3,000 years of established galactic law. I'm not overturning anything, said calmly. I'm proposing amendments that reflect the reality of human participation in galactic affairs. You can accept these terms, or humanity can withdraw from the Council entirely and pursue our interests through other means. The threat was clear. A species willing to assassinate enemy commanders during diplomatic negotiations would not hesitate to wage unrestricted warfare if excluded from peaceful resolution mechanisms. Representative processed this for several long seconds before speaking, and if the Council rejects your proposed amendments, walked over to the chamber's main display screen, which showed a real-time tactical map of the galaxy. With a few gestures, she highlighted the positions of human colonies, trade routes, and military assets. Then she added a new layer to the display: the positions of worlds, hegemony core systems, technocracy manufacturing centers, and the home worlds of every other major civilization. Humanity will defend itself, she said simply, by any means necessary. The display showed what this meant in practical terms. Human ships were scattered throughout the galaxy, often in positions that provided excellent staging areas for attacks on critical infrastructure. What had appeared to be simple trade and colonization efforts now revealed themselves as strategic positioning for potential military campaigns. You've been planning this from the beginning, whispered Chancellor. We've been planning for every contingency, corrected, including the possibility that established powers would attempt to bully us into submission. We're prepared to be peaceful neighbors and productive partners. We're equally prepared to be the galaxy's most dangerous enemy. She turned back to face the assembled representatives, her expression serious but not hostile. The choice is yours. You can adapt to the reality of human participation in galactic affairs, or you can attempt to force us back into the box you've prepared for younger civilizations. But understand this: that box was never built to hold something like humanity. The silence stretched for long minutes as each representative contemplated their options. Finally, Representative spoke. Your combat skills are impressive, he admitted. But warfare involves more than individual prowess. How many of your species share this? Dedication to violence. Smile became genuinely warm for the first time since entering the chamber. Representative, every human colony has a militia. Every human trade ship carries military-grade weapons and crews trained in combat operations. Every human child learns to fight before they learn to read. We don't have soldiers, Representative. We are soldiers. She paused, letting this sink in. But more importantly, we don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight to protect what we've built. Our families, our homes, our right to exist peacefully in this galaxy. That makes us far more dangerous than any species that fights for profit or territorial expansion. The truth of this statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Every representative could calculate the mathematics. A species where every individual was a potential combatant, with the skills and motivation to defend their civilization at any cost. There's one more thing you should understand, continued. What happened here today wasn't revenge for New Geneva. It was a demonstration, a proof of concept. Admiral was chosen not because he was the most dangerous enemy of humanity, but because he was the most convenient example. She gestured toward the data pad on the table. That device contains detailed assassination plans for every major leader in the galaxy. Not because we want to kill you, but because we want you to understand that we can. The choice of whether to remain peaceful neighbors or become active enemies is entirely in your hands. Chancellor's voice was barely audible. This is not how civilized beings conduct diplomacy. You're right, agreed. Civilized beings don't commit genocide and call it a navigation error. Civilized beings don't prey upon weaker neighbors simply because they can. Civilized beings don't ignore mass murder because the paperwork is inconvenient. She picked up Admiral's head one final time, holding it so that its dead eyes faced the assembled representatives. This is what happens to those who choose to be uncivilized in humanity's presence. We don't make war on entire populations. We make war on those who choose to be evil, surgically, precisely, personally. Setting the head down gently, she stepped back from the table. I'll give you 1 hour to discuss my proposals among yourselves. When I return, I expect a decision. Either we move forward together under new terms that reflect the reality of human capabilities, or humanity withdraws from this council and pursues our interests through other channels. She turned toward the chamber's exit, then paused. Oh, and representatives, the next time someone decides to test human resolve with an accidental attack on our civilians, they won't have the luxury of a diplomatic execution. We'll skip straight to total warfare. I thought you should know that when making your decision. With that, walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, leaving behind 43 terrified representatives and one very clear message. Humanity had arrived in galactic affairs, and the old rules no longer applied. The age of human diplomacy had begun, stood in the empty observation deck of the Council station, watching the swirling nebula beyond the massive viewport. The meeting recess had been called 47 minutes ago, and through the deck's acoustic dampeners, she could hear the muffled sounds of heated debate from the Council chamber 3 levels below. The representatives were learning to navigate a new reality, and the process was messy. Her communication device chimed softly. Staff Sergeant's voice came through the encrypted channel, professional and calm despite what they had just accomplished. Ambassador, all teams are in position. The station's security forces have been neutralized non-lethally, and we have control of critical systems. Local communications are being monitored and filtered. No distress signals have been transmitted. Nodded, though couldn't see her. The Void Reapers had moved with their usual efficiency. Within minutes of the execution, they had taken control of the space station's essential systems without firing a single shot. The other representatives didn't know it yet, but they were essentially prisoners until this situation resolved itself one way or another. Casualties on our side? None. The station's security was designed to handle diplomatic disputes and the occasional drunken trade delegate, not military insertion teams. We encountered 17 guards total. All are restrained and unharmed in the medical bay. Good, maintain positions but avoid unnecessary contact with station personnel. We want to be seen as professionals, not conquerors. Understood, Ambassador. Out. Returned her attention to the nebula outside. The Helix Formation was one of the galaxy's most beautiful sights, a stellar nursery where new stars were born from cosmic dust and ancient dreams. It was also strategically positioned at the intersection of 7 major trade routes, which made this station the perfect neutral ground for galactic diplomacy. Or it had been until today. Her personal communicator activated, displaying an incoming message from Admiral Sarah, no relation to Staff Sergeant, despite the shared surname. Admiral commanded the Solar Navy's 3rd Fleet and was currently positioned just outside the system's detection perimeter with 47 ships. We're monitoring the situation through your suit's telemetry. Hell of a thing you did in there. The Joint Chiefs are simultaneously proud and terrified. How are you holding up? Smiled slightly. Sarah had been her roommate at the Naval Academy 20 years ago, back when was still convinced she would spend her entire career in a starship's command chair. Life had taken them in different directions, but their friendship had remained strong. I'm fine, Sarah. A little surprised by how quiet everything is up here. I expected more panic, more emergency protocols. The other species seem to be taking this very calmly. That's because they're not sure what you are yet. Give them time to process and the real reactions will start. Our teams predict 3 possible responses: immediate capitulation, attempted military retaliation, or a coalition forming to contain humanity. Be ready for any of them. Consider this. What's your assessment of their military capabilities if they choose option 2? Individually, several species could give us a serious fight. They have superior combat experience, the technocracy has better shield technology, and the hegemony's sheer numbers are problematic. But here's the thing. They've never fought a species like us. They're used to civilized warfare with rules and limitations. They fight for territory or resources or political advantage. And we fight for survival. Exactly. Plus, they have no experience with asymmetric warfare. Every conflict they've ever engaged in has been between roughly equivalent technological bases. They're not prepared for humans. Was about to respond when movement in the nebula caught her attention. Ships were emerging from the stellar formation, not human vessels, but something else entirely. Long, sleek craft with organic curves that seemed to flow rather than cut through space. Sarah, are you reading this? New contacts emerging from the helix formation, configuration unknown. There was a pause as Admiral consulted her own sensors. We see them, 12 ships, unknown design. They're not matching anything in our databases. Wait, they're broadcasting something. The communication panel on station activated automatically, displaying an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything in the galactic database. Humanoid but clearly non-human, with metallic skin that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of the light. The being's eyes were solid silver, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. I am Speaker of the Eternal Wanderers. We have observed the events within the council chamber with great interest. We request permission to join these negotiations. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. The Eternal Wanderers were legends, myths whispered about in the deep space trade stations. A nomadic civilization that predated every other known species, appearing randomly throughout the galaxy before vanishing again for decades or centuries. They were said to possess technology that bordered on the mystical. And they wanted to join her negotiations. Speaker, I am Ambassador of the Sol Confederation. While I appreciate your interest, these are internal council matters, perhaps. Ambassador, the speaker interrupted, its silver eyes focusing intently on her. We have been watching your species since your first tentative steps into interstellar space. We have seen how you conduct yourselves, how you treat both allies and enemies, how you adapt to challenges that would destroy other civilizations. Today's demonstration merely confirms what we have long suspected. Felt her pulse quicken, and what is that? That humanity represents something new in this galaxy, something that has been needed for a very long time. The speaker's image shifted, and realized she was seeing through some form of holographic projection that allowed her to observe the being's full form. Speaker stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms that moved in perfect coordination. Its ship's bridge was unlike anything in its experience, organic curves that seemed to pulse with their own life, displays that showed information through shifting patterns of light and color rather than traditional screens. The current galactic order, Speaker continued, is stagnant. The same powers have dominated the same territories for fighting the same wars over the same resources. Innovation has slowed to a crawl. Exploration has nearly ceased. The galaxy is dying of its own stability. And you think humanity can change that? We know humanity will change that. Your species possesses something that others have lost, the willingness to take risks for the sake of growth, the courage to challenge established authority when it becomes corrupt, the flexibility to adapt to any situation. Considered this carefully. The Eternal Wanderers were offering something, but she had no idea what they wanted in return. In her experience, no one offered help without expecting something back. Speaker, while I'm honored by your interest, I should point out that humanity is currently in the process of negotiating our continued participation in the galactic community. Your endorsement might be premature. The speaker's metallic face shifted into what might have been a smile. Ambassador, do you believe the other council members have any choice but to accept your terms? Glanced toward the council chamber where the debate was still raging. There's always a choice. They could call our bluff. It is not a bluff, and they know it. Your species has just demonstrated something unprecedented. The ability to strike at the heart of enemy leadership with surgical precision in a location that was considered absolutely secure. Every representative in that chamber is now calculating how long they would survive if humanity decided they were a threat. The speaker moved to what assumed was a navigation station, its four arms dancing across controls that seemed to respond to touch with flowing patterns of light. More importantly, they are beginning to understand that humanity approaches warfare differently than any other species. You do not fight for conquest or glory or resources. You fight to eliminate threats to your civilization's survival. That makes you far more dangerous than any traditional military power. Nodded slowly. Because traditional military powers have limited objectives. They want to capture territory or defeat enemy fleets or achieve specific political goals. We want to remove the threat entirely. Precisely, and the most effective way to remove a threat is to eliminate its source, the leaders who make the decision to be threatening. A new signal came through on's communicator, this one from inside the council station. Representative was requesting a private meeting before the formal session resumed. Looked at speaker's image on her screen. Speaker, I need to attend to the immediate situation. Will you remain in the system? We will observe, Ambassador. And when your negotiations are complete, we would very much like to discuss humanity's future role in galactic affairs. We believe there are opportunities for cooperation that would benefit both our species. The transmission ended, leaving alone with her thoughts and a growing sense that today's events were part of something much larger than she had originally planned. The meeting with Representative took place in one of the station's smaller diplomatic chambers. The warrior stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, with natural armor plating that had been enhanced with cybernetic improvements over his long military career. His species valued combat excellence above all else, and had earned his position through personal prowess rather than political maneuvering. Ambassador, he began without preamble, my delegation has been discussing your demonstration. We find ourselves impressed by your tactical execution. Remained standing, matching's formal posture. Thank you, Representative. The military reputation is well-deserved. Your approval means something. However, continued, we have concerns about the precedent this creates. If diplomatic immunity can be revoked through violence, what prevents other species from adopting similar tactics? Had been expecting this question. Representative, diplomatic immunity assumes that all parties are acting in good faith within established diplomatic norms. Admiral committed genocide and attempted to use diplomatic protocols to escape consequences. That places him outside the protection of those same protocols. A convenient interpretation. A logical one. Tell me, Representative, if a warrior violated the codes of honorable combat and then demanded protection under those same codes, what would your response be? His combat clause extended slightly, an involuntary response that indicated strong emotion. Such a warrior would forfeit all claims to honor and protection. Exactly. Honor is earned through honorable actions and lost through dishonorable ones. Admiral forfeited any claim to diplomatic protection the moment he decided to murder civilians for political convenience. Moved to the chamber's small viewport, which offered a view of the Eternal Wanderer's ships maintaining their position near the nebula. But there's a larger issue here, Representative. Your species understands the concept of honor in combat. You fight according to established rules because those rules make combat meaningful rather than merely destructive. Nodded slowly. Combat without honor is mere slaughter. Agreed, but what happens when one side abandons honor? When they use prohibited tactics, target non-combatants, violate truces, commit atrocities? Do the honorable fighters continue following rules that their enemies ignore? The question hung in the air between them. This was the fundamental challenge that humanity brought to galactic affairs, the willingness to match their opponent's level of commitment while maintaining their own moral standards. Humans have an interesting approach to this dilemma, continued. We maintain our honor by protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty. When someone violates the basic standards of civilized behavior, we respond with exactly the level of force necessary to stop them and prevent recurrence. You become temporarily dishonorable in order to restore honor to the situation. We become temporarily savage in order to protect civilization. It's a distinction our species learned through hard experience. Process this for several long moments. The other representatives fear that humans will use violence to solve every diplomatic dispute. They should fear the opposite, replied. They should fear that we'll only use violence when diplomacy has genuinely failed, because when humanity resorts to warfare, we don't fight to achieve political objectives. We fight to solve problems permanently. And Admiral was a problem that required permanent solution. Admiral was a test case. His death demonstrates our capability and our resolve, but more importantly, it establishes the price of attacking human civilians. Future aggressors will know exactly what they're risking when they choose violence against our species. His armor plating shifted slightly, a sign of deep thought in his species. Your execution of Admiral was efficient, but the Armada still exists. 400 ships with crews that now have personal reasons to hate humanity. Have you considered the possibility of retaliation? Smiled and was reminded uncomfortably of a predator that had just detected the scent of prey. Representative, why do you think the Eternal Wanderers are here? The Wanderers? His voice carried a note of surprise. What do they have to do with this situation? They've been observing humanity since we first achieved interstellar flight. Today's demonstration apparently convinced them that we're worth supporting. 12 of their ships are currently holding position near the Helix formation. The implications of this hit immediately. The Eternal Wanderers' technology was legendary throughout the galaxy. Their ships could apparently appear and disappear at will, and their weapons systems were beyond anything that conventional civilizations could deploy, if they were supporting humanity. You planned this, he said with something approaching admiration. The execution, the demonstration, even the Wanderers' arrival, this entire situation was orchestrated. Not orchestrated, corrected. Prepared for. We knew that joining the galactic community would eventually require us to demonstrate our capabilities. Admiral's attack on New Geneva simply provided the perfect opportunity. She moved away from the viewport and faced directly. Representative, I want you to understand something important. Humanity doesn't want to dominate the galaxy or displace existing civilizations. We want to build something new. A galactic community where strength protects the weak, where justice actually means something, and where peaceful civilizations can grow without fear of predation. And if existing civilizations refuse to accept this vision, then they'll discover that humanity is very good at removing obstacles to peaceful coexistence. His translator struggled with the complex harmonics of his laughter. Ambassador, I believe I am beginning to understand your species. You offer partnership to those who choose honor and destruction to those who choose dishonor. We offer choice, representative, always choice, but we also ensure that choices have appropriate consequences. What of my people? They have always valued strength and combat skill. How do we fit into humanity's vision? His expression became genuinely warm. Representative, a civilization that truly values honor and combat excellence, that understands the difference between strength and cruelty, you would be invaluable partners. Imagine what we could accomplish together, human adaptability and honor working toward common goals. And what would humanity expect from such a partnership? Honesty, loyalty, the willingness to stand together when threats emerge that endanger peaceful civilizations. In return, humanity would share our technological innovations, our military techniques, and our commitment to protecting what we build together. Considered this proposal carefully. They had spent centuries fighting border wars and territorial disputes with neighboring civilizations. The opportunity to join something larger, something that aligned with their cultural values while offering genuine growth potential. I will need to discuss this with my military council, he said finally. But personally, I find humanity's approach refreshing. It has been too long since we encountered a species that truly understands the proper relationship between strength and responsibility. Nodded, take all the time you need, representative. But remember, this opportunity exists because humanity chose to demonstrate our capabilities today. Tomorrow's opportunities will depend on the choices that other civilizations make in response. Extended one massive clawed hand in the gesture of respect between warriors. Clasped it with both of her own hands, matching the strength of his grip despite the significant size difference. When the formal session resumes, said, the delegation will support humanity's proposed amendments to the Council Charter. Your species has earned the right to be heard. As left the chamber, felt a complex mix of satisfaction and apprehension. The plan was working better than she had dared hope, but success brought its own challenges. Humanity was about to take on a much larger role in galactic affairs, and that meant accepting responsibility for consequences they couldn't fully predict. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Chancellor of the Hegemony. "Ambassador, we need to talk. Privately. There are complications you should be aware of before the session resumes." Smiled grimly. Of course there were complications. There always were. Chancellor's private chamber aboard the council station was a study in controlled opulence. The hegemony favored displays of wealth and power, and every surface gleamed with precious metals and exotic materials gathered from across their 47 star systems. But for all its grandeur, noticed that the chamber was designed like a fortress. Reinforced walls, multiple escape routes, and weapon systems discreetly built into the decorative elements. The Chancellor himself was a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall and broad in proportion, with 6 arms that could function independently or in coordination depending on the task at hand. His species had evolved from pack hunters, and their political structures reflected that heritage through complex hierarchies and alliance networks. "Ambassador," he began, gesturing to an elaborate seat designed to accommodate multiple body types, "please make yourself comfortable. We have much to discuss." Remained standing. "Chancellor, I appreciate the invitation, but I should point out that our formal negotiations resume in 37 minutes. Perhaps we should save private discussions for after the council reaches a decision." His primary hands clasped together, while his secondary arms continued arranging data displays around the chamber. "Ambassador, what I need to share with you cannot wait for formal proceedings. It concerns the true nature of the galactic situation you have just inserted yourself into." Felt her tactical instincts activate? "Go on." "You see, your demonstration today, the execution of Admiral, was observed by more than just the Council representatives. We have been monitoring communications from across the galaxy, and the news is spreading rapidly. Within 6 hours, every major civilization will know what happened here." Activated a 3-dimensional star map that filled the center of the chamber. Hundreds of star systems appeared in various colors, indicating different political allegiances and military capabilities. "This is the current galactic situation," the Chancellor continued. "What appears to be a collection of independent civilizations coexisting peacefully is actually a complex web of defensive alliances, territorial agreements, and mutual non-aggression pacts. The balance has remained stable for over 2." Studied the map, noting the intricate patterns of connection between different systems. "And you're concerned that humanity's actions today will disrupt that balance." "I am certain of it. Your species has just demonstrated capabilities that no existing power can match. Surgical strikes against enemy leadership, flawless coordination between military and diplomatic efforts, and the apparent ability to neutralize advanced security systems without triggering alarms. Every civilization is now recalculating their strategic positions based on the assumption that humans can assassinate their leaders at will." The map shifted, showing projected alliance patterns based on the new information about human capabilities. The results were alarming: traditional partnerships dissolving, defensive coalitions forming specifically to contain humanity, and several previously neutral systems beginning military buildups. "Chancellor," said carefully, "are you suggesting that humanity should have allowed the genocide on New Geneva to go unpunished in order to preserve galactic stability?" "I am suggesting that the method of your response has created problems that may be more dangerous than the original crime." Moved closer to the star map, examining the projected alliance patterns. "Show me the worst-case scenario." Manipulated the display and watched as the galaxy reorganized itself into 2 opposing camps. Civilizations that viewed humanity as a potential threat to be contained, and those that saw an opportunity to align with a rising power. The mathematics were sobering. The anti-human coalition would control over 70% of known military assets. "This assumes that every civilization makes decisions based purely on fear," observed. "But political entities don't always act rationally when presented with new information." "No, but they do act predictably when their survival appears to be threatened. And Ambassador, you must understand, from their perspective, Humanity has just announced that we consider ourselves above the laws and customs that govern galactic civilization. Turned away from the map to face directly. Chancellor, may I ask you a direct question? Of course. Do you personally believe that Admiral deserved to die for what he did on New Geneva? Six Arms fell still, a sign of deep concentration among his species. Ambassador! Yes, the attack on your colony was unprovoked genocide. In a just universe, Admiral would face appropriate consequences for his actions. But justice and political stability are sometimes incompatible. The galactic community has maintained peace for 2,000 years by accepting that some injustices must be tolerated for the sake of the greater good. Nodded slowly. I see, and you're concerned that humanity's refusal to tolerate injustice will destabilize the entire system. I am certain of it. Your species represents something genuinely new, a civilization with the power to enforce its moral standards on others. That terrifies every established government in the galaxy. Returned her attention to the star map, studying the projected coalition patterns. Chancellor, show me something else. Display the civilian casualties from the last century of stable galactic politics. Hesitated, then modified the display. New information appeared, casualty figures from border conflicts, territorial disputes, and navigation errors like the one that had destroyed New Geneva. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of billions of civilian deaths, all accepted as the inevitable cost of maintaining balance between major powers. Your system of stable peace, said quietly, has killed more civilians in the past 100 years than humanity's total population. You've achieved stability by accepting genocide as a normal part of political discourse. It is regrettable, but it is unacceptable. His voice carried a hard edge that made step back involuntarily. Chancellor, let me explain something about human psychology. We don't view civilian casualties as acceptable losses. We view them as failures that demand correction. She gestured toward the casualty figures. Every one of these numbers represents someone's family, someone's community, someone's entire world, and you've been treating them as statistical noise for the sake of political convenience. But without stability, without justice, stability is just organized oppression. The strong prey upon the weak while everyone else looks the other way and calls it peace. Moved to the chamber's viewport, which offered a view of the Eternal Wanderer's ship still holding position near the nebula. Chancellor, I want you to understand something about the choice facing the galaxy right now. It's not between stability and chaos. It's between evolution and stagnation. I don't understand. Your current system has reached its limits. It can maintain itself, but it cannot grow, cannot improve, cannot adapt to new challenges. It's a closed loop that preserves itself by consuming the lives of those too weak to defend themselves. Turned back to face, humanity offers something different, not stability based on accepting injustice, but growth based on eliminating the sources of injustice. Yes, it will be messy. Yes, it will require existing powers to change their behavior, but it will also create something genuinely better. And if the galaxy rejects your offer, then we'll build our own section of the galaxy according to our principles and leave the rest of you to consume each other in peace. But Chancellor, I think you'll find that once people see what we're building, they'll want to be part of it. Process this for several long moments. Ambassador, you speak of your principles as if they are self-evidently correct, but every civilization believes its own values are superior. What makes humanity different? Smiled and was reminded of predators that had just detected vulnerable prey. Because we're willing to pay the personal cost of enforcing our principles. Every other civilization in the galaxy will commit atrocities when it's convenient and preach morality when it's safe. Humans will commit morality when it's dangerous and accept the consequences. The execution of Admiral was just the beginning. Chancellor, every military leader in the galaxy is now calculating their personal risk if they choose to target human civilians. Every political leader is wondering if their decisions might make them legitimate targets for human retaliation. Every species is their approach to warfare based on the knowledge that humans don't just fight armies. We eliminate the people who create armies. Secondary arms began manipulating data controls, while his primary arms remained focused on. You realize that this approach will force the galaxy into a defensive alliance against humanity. No political leader can accept the precedent you've established. Some will, others won't. The question is, which group will ultimately prove to be stronger? Moved closer to the star map, examining the current distribution of human colonies and military assets. Chancellor, show me the economic data for human-controlled systems over the past 50 years. Modified the display, and new information appeared showing trade volumes, population growth, technological development, and resource exploitation rates for human space. The trends were unmistakable. Rapid growth across all metrics, with particularly impressive advances in applied technology and resource efficiency. Now compare that to the galactic average for the same period. The comparison was stark. Human-controlled space was developing at rates that far exceeded the galactic norm, with innovation cycles that were measured in years rather than decades. You see the pattern, said. Human civilization isn't just different morally, we're different practically. We solve problems faster, adapt to challenges more efficiently, and create new opportunities more rapidly than established civilizations. Which means that any civilization that chooses to work with us rather than against us will benefit enormously. We don't just offer protection from predators, we offer the chance to grow beyond current limitations. Gestured toward the projected alliance patterns. Your worst-case scenario assumes that civilizations will choose sides based purely on fear, but fear is a short-term motivation. Opportunity is much more powerful in the long run. Studied the data for several minutes before speaking. You're suggesting that humanity will win any confrontation through economic and technological superiority rather than military force. I'm suggesting that we won't need to win through military force because the alternative we offer is genuinely more attractive. Yes, working with humans means accepting higher standards of behavior, but it also means access to human innovation, human problem-solving abilities, and human protection against those who refuse to accept civilized standards. And those who continue to choose predation. His expression became cold and predatory. We'll discover that humans are very efficient at eliminating predators. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Staff Sergeant. Ambassador, we're detecting significant military movement in several nearby systems. Multiple fleets appear to be converging on this position. Estimated time to arrival, 4 to 6 hours. Acknowledged the message, then looked at Chancellor. It appears your predictions about galactic reaction are proving accurate, Chancellor. The question now is, will the hegemony be part of the solution or part of the problem? Six arms moved in complex patterns as he considered his options. The hegemony controlled 47 star systems and maintained one of the galaxy's largest trade networks. Their decision would significantly influence how other civilizations responded to humanity's challenge to the existing order. Ambassador, he said finally, the hegemony has survived for 3,000 years by choosing pragmatic solutions over idealistic ones. We maintain power by understanding the realities of galactic politics. Go on. The reality is that humanity has just demonstrated capabilities that change everything. You can eliminate enemy leadership at will, you have mysterious allies with advanced technology, and your species appears to be genuinely committed to your stated principles regardless of the cost. Nodded, those are indeed the realities. Which means that opposing humanity is likely to be expensive and potentially suicidal, while cooperating with humanity offers significant opportunities for growth and protection. I would agree with that assessment. Its primary arms extended in the hegemony's formal gesture of alliance offer. Ambassador, the hegemony hereby offers to support humanity's proposed amendments to the Galactic Council Charter and to explore formal alliance agreements that would be mutually beneficial. Clasped massive hands with her own, matching the formal gesture. Chancellor, humanity accepts the hegemony's offer and looks forward to building something together that will benefit both our civilizations. There is one condition, added. The hegemony's support comes with the understanding that human justice will be applied proportionally. We cannot support a system where minor infractions result in assassination. Understood, human retaliation will always be proportional to the original offense. Admiral died because he committed genocide. Lesser crimes will face lesser consequences. And how will such decisions be made? Who determines guilt and appropriate punishment? Smiled grimly. Chancellor, that's an excellent question, and I suspect it will be one of the first major issues we'll need to address in our new partnership. As they completed the alliance ritual, tactical instincts were calculating the implications of this development. The hegemony's support would likely bring several smaller civilizations into the pro-human camp, but it would also solidify opposition among those who viewed any cooperation with humanity as surrendering their independence. The galaxy was choosing sides, and the choice was accelerating. Her communicator chimed again, this time with a message from Admiral Sarah. "We're tracking at least 6 different fleets moving toward your position. This is either going to be the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history or the largest battle. Either way, I recommend you conclude your negotiations quickly." Looked at Chancellor, who was monitoring his own communications and receiving updates from hegemony intelligence networks. "Chancellor, it appears that your predictions about galactic reaction times were conservative. How long before we have a collection of very angry civilizations demanding explanations?" "Approximately 3 hours," replied grimly. "And Ambassador, not all of them will be interested in negotiation." Felt the familiar calm that settled over her in crisis situations. "Then we'd better make sure the next few hours count, hadn't we?" As they prepared to return to the council chamber for what might be the most important diplomatic session in galactic history, found herself thinking about the eternal wanderers still holding position near the nebula. Speaker had said that humanity represented something new, something that had been needed for a long time. The council chamber had transformed during the recess. What had been a scene of shocked silence 3 hours earlier was now crackling with tension as representatives huddled in small groups, their conversations creating a constant background hum of political maneuvering. Noticed that seating arrangements had shifted. Some delegates had moved closer to the human delegation area, while others had clustered as far away as possible. Admiral's severed head still sat in the center of the negotiation table, serving as a stark reminder of the new realities governing galactic politics. Several representatives pointedly avoided looking at it, while others seemed unable to look away. Entered the chamber exactly on schedule, flanked by 2 Void Reapers in full combat gear. The message was subtle but clear. Humanity was prepared for any outcome, whether diplomatic or military. "Representatives," announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "I trust you've had sufficient time to discuss the situation among yourselves. Before we proceed with formal voting on humanity's proposed amendments, I believe you should be aware of current military movements in nearby systems." She activated the chamber's main display screen, which immediately showed a tactical overview of local space. The image was sobering. 17 different fleets were converging on the station's position, representing nearly every major military power in the galaxy. "As you can see," continued, "news of today's events has traveled quickly. We appear to have attracted some attention." Representative of the Democratic Worlds Union stood abruptly, her bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. "Ambassador, you have triggered a galactic crisis. These fleets represent a combined military force of over 2,000 vessels, if they arrive while tensions remain unresolved." "Then we'll have a very large and very dangerous crowd to deal with," agreed calmly. "Which is why I recommend we conclude our business here quickly and efficiently." Chancellor rose from his position, his 6 arms moving in formal gestures as he addressed the chamber. "Representatives, the hegemony has concluded our analysis of the situation. We hereby formally support humanity's proposed amendments to the Galactic Charter." A ripple of surprise and alarm passed through the chamber. The hegemony's support carried enormous weight. Their 47 star systems and vast trade networks gave them influence that rivaled any other single civilization. Representative stood next, his armor plating gleaming under the chamber's lights. "The military caste also supports the human amendments. We recognize both the capability and the honor demonstrated by humanity today." The shifting alliance patterns were becoming visible in real time. Watched as several smaller civilizations that traditionally followed hegemony or lead began moving toward the pro-human bloc, while others retreated further into opposition. Representative of the technocracy activated his mechanical voice systems, the sound cutting through the chamber's growing tension like a blade. "The technocracy objects to these proceedings in the strongest possible terms. The summary execution of a council member, regardless of his alleged crimes, violates every principle upon which galactic civilization is based. Furthermore, continued, humanity's demonstrated willingness to use violence against diplomatic personnel creates an unacceptable precedent. We demand that Ambassador be arrested and tried for murder, and that humanity be expelled from the galactic community pending a full investigation of their military capabilities. Had been expecting this challenge. Representative, I appreciate your concern for diplomatic protocols. However, I should point out that Admiral was not functioning as a diplomatic representative when he committed genocide against New Geneva. He was acting as a military commander engaged in war crimes. The distinction is irrelevant, replied. Violence during diplomatic proceedings cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. Smiled, and several representatives felt an involuntary chill. Representative, are you prepared to personally guarantee that no member of this council will ever again target human civilians for military action? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. His mechanical systems processed the implications for several seconds before he responded. The technocracy cannot speak for other civilizations' military policies. Then you cannot guarantee that diplomatic immunity will be respected by those who claim it. Representative, humanity operates under a simple principle. Those who choose to wage war against our civilians forfeit any claim to protection under peacetime agreements. Gestured toward the tactical display, which was now showing the approaching fleets in greater detail. I noticed that several of those incoming vessels belong to the technocracy. Are they here for diplomatic consultation, or are you preparing to enforce your objections through military action? His mechanical voice carried harmonics that suggested stress in his organic components. The technocracy fleet is present to ensure stability during these negotiations. I see, and how exactly does threatening military action contribute to stability? Before could respond, the chamber's communication systems activated with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on the main screen was unknown to most representatives, but recognized speaker of the Eternal Wanderers immediately. Representatives of the Galactic Council, the speaker began, its metallic voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the chamber's structure. We have observed today's proceedings with great interest. We wish to address certain misconceptions that appear to be developing. Representative found her voice first. Speaker, while we appreciate the Eternal Wanderer's interest, these are internal council matters, perhaps. Representative, the speaker interrupted smoothly, the Eternal Wanderers have been observing galactic civilization since long before your species achieved. We have watched the rise and fall of dozens of political systems, the birth and death of countless civilizations. We speak from experience that spans. The speaker's image shifted to show a broader view of its ship's bridge, revealing other Eternal Wanderers working at stations that seem to blend technology with organic systems in ways that conventional understanding. The current galactic order, speaker continued, has reached the limits of its growth potential. For 2,000 years, you have maintained stability through the simple expedient of allowing strong civilizations to prey upon weak ones while calling it balance. This approach has prevented catastrophic wars, but it has also prevented genuine progress. Watched the representatives' reactions carefully. Some seemed genuinely interested in the speaker's perspective, while others appeared increasingly uncomfortable with outside analysis of their political system. Humanity, the speaker continued, represents something genuinely new in galactic affairs, not because they are more violent than other species, but because they are more moral. They possess the capability to enforce ethical standards that others merely discuss. Representative's mechanical voice cut through the chamber. Speaker, with respect, the Eternal Wanderers have never participated directly in galactic governance. Your perspective, while historically informed, lacks practical understanding of current political realities. Speaker's silver eyes seemed to focus directly on through the transmission. Representative, we have never participated directly because we have been waiting for a species capable of genuine leadership to emerge. Today's demonstration suggests that such a species has finally appeared. The implications of this statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Eternal Wanderers, with their legendary technology and mysterious capabilities, were offering direct support to humanity. Felt the moment shift around her like a tide turning. Speaker, while humanity appreciates your confidence in our species, I should point out that we're currently in the middle of rather delicate negotiations. Your support is noted, but perhaps premature. Ambassador, the speaker replied with what might have been amusement. Do you believe these negotiations are actually about the amendments you've proposed? Paused, considering the question carefully. Please elaborate. These proceedings are not about diplomatic protocols or territorial agreements. They are about whether galactic civilization will evolve beyond its current limitations or entrench itself further in profitable stagnation. The choice being made here today will determine the direction of galactic development for the next several. The speaker's image expanded to show a complex display of data that recognized as an analysis: population growth rates, technological development cycles, resource utilization efficiency, and dozens of other metrics that measured a species' long-term viability. Observe the trends, speaker continued. Every established civilization in this chamber has reached developmental plateaus. Population growth has stagnated, technological innovation has slowed, exploration has essentially ceased. You have created a stable system that preserves itself by consuming its own future potential. The data was undeniable. Across virtually every metric, the galaxy's established civilizations were showing signs of stagnation or decline. Now observe the human data. The display shifted to show humanity's metrics over the past century. The contrast was striking: rapid growth across all categories, with innovation cycles and adaptation rates that far exceeded galactic norms. Humanity has not reached developmental plateaus because they have not accepted the limitations that constrain other civilizations. They solve problems that others consider permanent features of existence. They grow in directions that others consider impossible. Found herself genuinely curious about the speaker's analysis. And you believe this is connected to our approach to justice and conflict resolution? Indirectly, yes. Civilizations that accept injustice as politically necessary eventually accept all limitations as necessary. They lose the ability to envision fundamental improvements to their condition. Humanity's refusal to accept injustice reflects a broader refusal to accept unnecessary limitations of any kind. Representative leaned forward in his seat. Speaker, are you suggesting that moral courage and innovative capability are connected? We are suggesting that they are the same phenomenon expressed in different domains. Species that will not tolerate evil will also not tolerate inefficiency, stagnation, or artificial constraints on their development. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as representatives processed this perspective. Realized that the eternal wanderers were offering more than military support. They were providing a philosophical framework that justified humanity's approach to galactic affairs. Her communicator chimed softly with an urgent message from Staff Sergeant. Ambassador, the first of the incoming fleets will arrive in approximately 90 minutes. We're identifying at least 4 different civilizations that appear to be coordinating their approach. This looks like a planned military intervention. Acknowledge the message, then address the chamber. Representatives, I've just received word that our visitors will be arriving sooner than expected. I recommend we conclude our business quickly. She moved to stand beside the negotiation table, placing one hand on Admiral's severed head. The choice before us is simple. You can vote to accept humanity's proposed amendments, establishing new standards for galactic civilization that protect the innocent and hold aggressors accountable. Or you can reject our proposals and attempt to maintain the current system through force. His other hand moved to rest on the grip of her sidearm. But understand this. If you choose the second option, you will be choosing war with a species that has just demonstrated the ability to eliminate enemy leadership at will, in locations you considered absolutely secure. More importantly, you will be choosing war with a species that genuinely believes our cause is worth dying for. The silence in the chamber was profound. Could see individual representatives calculating their options, weighing the risks of cooperation against the risks of confrontation. Representative spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Ambassador, if we accept your amendments, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't use these new powers to dominate other civilizations? Smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, the expression carried genuine warmth rather than predatory threat. Representative, you have the guarantee that human culture provides. We only fight to protect what we love. We love justice, freedom, the right to build something better than what existed before. Any civilization that shares those values has nothing to fear from humanity. And those that don't share those values will discover that humanity is very committed to spreading them. Chancellor rose from his seat, his 6 arms moving in formal patterns. Representatives, the hegemony calls for an immediate vote on humanity's proposed amendments. The approaching fleets make further delay inadvisable. Representatives stood as well. The delegation seconds this motion. Let us determine our path before others attempt to determine it for us. Watched as the chamber organized itself for formal voting procedures. The process would take approximately 20 minutes, which would put them dangerously close to the arrival of the first military fleets. But as she observed the delegates preparing their positions, realized that the real vote had already been taken. The galaxy had decided that humanity would be allowed to evolve its political system, even if some civilizations needed to be convinced through more direct methods. Speaker's voice carried through the chamber one final time before the transmission ended. Representatives, choose wisely. Evolution is inevitable, but it need not be traumatic. The future you build today will determine whether the next millennium brings growth or conflict. As the formal voting began, found herself thinking about the approaching fleets and the choices their commanders would face when they arrived. Some would come seeking confrontation, others hopping for negotiated solutions. All of them would discover that humanity had changed the rules of galactic politics permanently. The only question now was how expensive that lesson would be for those who chose to leer. The voting process concluded with 17 minutes to spare before the first fleet's arrival. Watched the final tallies appear on the chamber's display screen. 26 civilizations in favor of humanity's amendments, 12 opposed, and 5 abstentions. It was a clear victory, but knew that the real test would come when the opposing fleets discovered what had been decided in their absence. The motion carries, announced Chancellor formally. Humanity's proposed amendments to the Galactic Charter are hereby adopted. Ambassador, the Council recognizes humanity's right to enforce proportional justice against those who target human civilians and to pursue military solutions to diplomatic problems when conventional channels have failed. Nodded gravely. The Sol Confederation accepts this responsibility and pledges to exercise it with appropriate restraint and consideration for galactic stability. Even as she spoke the formal words, tactical awareness was tracking the approaching threat. The first fleet to arrive would be the Revenge Force, 87 ships commanded by Admiral's second-in-command, Admiral. According to intelligence reports, she had been broadcasting promises to cleanse the galaxy of human filth during her entire journey to the Council station. Staff Sergeant's voice came through, earpiece, calm and professional despite the circumstances. Ambassador, fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the system perimeter. They're broadcasting surrender demands and targeting our position. Estimated time to weapons range, 12 minutes. Activated her communication device, sending a signal on all diplomatic frequencies. Admiral, this is Ambassador of the Sol Confederation. The Galactic Council has just concluded formal proceedings regarding your predecessor's actions. I invite you to review the official records before taking any precipitous action. The response came immediately, Admiral's voice distorted by anger and the mechanical translation systems. Human filth! You murdered Admiral during diplomatic proceedings. The Armada demands satisfaction. Surrender yourself for execution, or we will destroy every human vessel in this system. Glanced around the council chamber, noting that several representatives were hastily gathering their belongings and preparing to evacuate. Others remained in their seats, apparently fascinated by the opportunity to observe human crisis management techniques firsthand. Admiral replied calmly. Admiral was executed for committing genocide against New Geneva Colony. His death was justice, not murder. However, if you feel that honor requires satisfaction, I am prepared to offer you the same opportunity for personal combat that your predecessor received. The silence that followed this statement was broken by Representative's mechanical voice. Ambassador, surely you don't intend to provoke a military engagement with 87 enemy vessels. Smiled and was reminded once again of predators that had just detected prey. Representative, I intend to conclude this matter in the most efficient manner possible. Admiral has 2 choices. accept the Council's decision regarding her predecessor's fate, or repeat his mistakes and face similar consequences. Her communication device activated again with Admiral's response. You speak of single combat, human, but I command an entire fleet. Why should I limit myself to your preferred method of conflict resolution? Because, replied, moving to stand beside the Council chamber's massive viewport, single combat is the only method that gives you any chance of survival. Admiral, are you familiar with the current positions of human military assets in this system? Activated the chamber's display screen, showing a tactical overview of local space. The fleet was clearly visible as a massive red formation approaching from the system perimeter. But as the display updated with new information, additional contacts began appearing, human vessels that had been concealed throughout the system using advanced stealth technology. The mathematics were sobering. What had appeared to be a lopsided confrontation between 87 ships and a handful of human vessels was actually a carefully prepared ambush. Counted over 200 human military assets positioned at strategic points throughout the system. Admiral continued, you have approximately 8 minutes before entering the engagement envelope of the Third Solar Fleet. Admiral Sarah is prepared to demonstrate why human military doctrine is considered innovative. However, I'm willing to offer you an alternative that preserves both lives and honor. Moved away from the viewport and returned to the negotiation table, where Admiral's severed head still served as a reminder of the day's earlier events. Single combat between designated champions. If your champion defeats mine, the Armada may depart this system without interference, and the matter of Admiral's execution will be considered closed. If my champion proves victorious, the Armada will acknowledge humanity's right to seek justice for attacks on our civilians. The chamber fell silent as representatives processed this offer. Single combat to resolve fleet-level conflicts was not unknown in galactic history, but it was typically reserved for disputes between civilizations that held honor above political expedience. Admiral's response carried a note of surprise. You would stake your entire position on the outcome of individual combat. Admiral, I would stake humanity's honor on our champion's ability to defend our principles. The question is, are you prepared to do the same for honor? Activated a secondary communication channel, sending a coded signal to the Void Reapers positioned throughout the station. Within seconds, Staff Sergeant appeared in the Council chamber's main entrance, moving with the fluid grace that marked humanity's elite warriors. Admiral announced, I present Staff Sergeant Maria, champion of the Sol Confederation Marine Corps. She has volunteered to represent humanity's position in this matter. Stepped forward, her expression calm and professional despite the magnitude of what she was undertaking. She carried no visible weapons, but every movement suggested lethal capability held in careful check. Admiral said, speaking directly to the communication system, I am prepared to meet your champion in whatever form of combat your honor requires. Armed or unarmed, individual or small unit tactics, traditional dueling or modern warfare techniques. Choose your method, and we'll settle this question definitively. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a minute before Admiral responded. Your champion speaks boldly for one who faces a warrior. Very well. My champion is First Blade X, defender of 17 worlds and victor in 43 individual combats. He will meet your human in armed single combat using traditional blades. Nodded to, who smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had trained for exactly this moment her entire adult life. Admiral replied, I look forward to meeting First Blade X. Where and when would you prefer to conduct this engagement? The station's main cargo bay, Admiral replied. In 30 minutes, weapons will be traditional blades, no armor beyond what is ceremonial, and combat continues until one participant yields or dies. Felt a complex mixture of pride and concern as she watched prepare for what might be the most important single combat in human history. The Void Reaper Sergeant had never lost a fight, but she had also never faced a First Blade in formal combat. Said quietly, stepping close enough to speak without being overheard, Are you certain about this? We have alternatives. The Third Fleet can handle the force if necessary. Smile was genuine and relaxed. Ambassador, with respect, this is what we trained for. Besides, Admiral just made a critical error. Oh, she assumed that it the hard way. She was beginning to understand exactly what that meant. But that was what humans did best: adapt to complications and turn them into opportunities.